Welcome to PixelTunes Radio, a podcast where we have fun talking about video games and video game music.
My name is Ed.
My name is Mike. We did that backwards. So we are here today to do a sequel to one of our biggest episodes. That would be Same Song, Different System, Volume 2. Well, the first one we did was Volume 1. And we were like, yeah, you know, we'll just kind of do this thing. It's new, it's hip, it's fresh, and let's see if you guys dig it. And you guys dug it, so we figured, why not do a second one?
Yeah, and we had a ton of fun doing it too. So basically what we do is we take ports of different games. So, for instance,
Final Fight.
Final Fight, yes, which has come out on multiple systems. So
Yes.
we would play a track from Final Fight. It would be the same track from the arcade version, the Super Nintendo version, and maybe the Sega CD version. So we're not actually doing that track this episode, but
Right.
it's just kind of an example. And then we'd compare and contrast and pick our favorite version among all the different versions of that particular song from that game. And also talk a little bit about the games themselves and how they differ from each other. So we had a lot of fun doing it last time, and I think it'll be just about as much fun this time, if not more fun.
Yes, more fun. More fun for everyone.
Hooray!
You get a fun. I get a fun.
Everybody gets a fun. It's like being on Oprah.
Yes. This is the video game version of Oprah, ladies and gentlemen.
PixelTunes Radio, where you can have a fun. Before we get into the music, though, we wanted to talk about our
wall. I need to clarify something.
Oh, we have a clarification corner.
We do have a clarification corner, so for those of you who are not aware, if we screw something up, we're not perfect, nobody's perfect, but
we own up to our mistakes.
Yes. And so if there's a game that came out that we're talking about and we're like, oh, you know what? I screwed up. We want to make sure that we give you guys the right information. So this is going to go way, way back to a previous episode from about a year ago. I had recently discovered via my co-host Ed here that I had accidentally quoted that Star Fox 2 was composed by Mary Yamaguchi. This was during the episode back with Aaron Hickman. And it turns out that I was completely wrong about that. I don't even know where I got that information
I don't either.
from. Yeah. The composers of Star Fox 2 were Kozue Ishikawa and Yumiko Kanki. My bad.
It's okay. Like I said, we own up to our mistakes. So.
And we'll probably, you know, talk about them in the near future, so they'll get their star to shine.
Absolutely.
So as far as the next episode, well, not the next episode, 2 episodes in advance, we're actually planning quite a bit for a fan submission episode. Yes, that's right. You requested it, we play it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the rules and regulations of this, Ed?
So for episode 39,
which is 2 episodes away,
we will pick 12 tracks from listeners and also allow you guys to submit some content of your own regarding that song. So we're gonna have a post on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/PixelTunes Radio. And what we're gonna do is have you guys request or submit tracks that you enjoy from songs that we haven't played on the show yet. And we're gonna take 12 of those submissions and we're gonna make a show out of it.
So what you need to do, before you do anything, is go back and listen to all 37 or 38 episodes and then pick your tracks.
Yes, you can also go to pixeltunesradio.com and we have all of our track listings there as well.
That's right.
So you can make sure that our track hasn't been played before. So if we do pick your track, you know, we're going to listen through them all, make sure that we can play them due to licensing reasons, etc., etc. And if we pick your track, we'll contact you. And then you can do one of 2 things. You can either write a couple paragraphs to us about what you like about the song, why you picked the song, why you like the game, or if you have the capability, you can record your own voice and we will play your voice on the podcast.
That's
describing the song and why you picked it, etc., etc. So we're gonna have that post again on the Facebook group page, and we would like your submissions by June 28th.
Of 2015.
So the post has been up for a little while, so if you don't see it right at the top of the Facebook group, you scroll down a little bit, it should be in there, but I'll most likely have it pinned to the top of the group so you guys can find it easily. And then we'll PM you or message you or find a way to get in contact with you, and then, you know, you can email us or send us your picks and your content. And
absolutely.
It'll be a really cool show. I think it'll be a great way to give back to you guys because you've given us so much love over the past year and a half.
That's right. And as far as the audio requirements, are there any audio requirements that we require? as far as...
I'm pretty good at finding video game music, so unless I cannot find it, which is kind of a rare situation, but it does happen once in a while, I may ask if you have the song, or I may just have to say that we are not able to play it because lack of availability. But usually I can find it. Generally, if it's on YouTube somewhere, I can find it. Even if it's not, I can sometimes even find it myself too.
Yep, and then as far as recording your voice, if you do decide to do that, easiest way to do it is honestly record in Audacity.
However, if you don't have professional recording equipment, you can even use the note creator in your iPhone or on Android. Those do a pretty good job as long as you're in a quiet area.
That's true.
So, send us whatever you got and we'll make it work.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and get into the first song.
So the first game we're going to be playing today is called Viewpoint, which came out originally on the Neo Geo in 1992. It's got a really cool kind of a techno soundtrack with even like throwback synths, even for that kind of era when retro wasn't cool. It kind of sounds like an older style computer game. It's got a really good soundtrack, and we're going to be hearing from the Neo Geo version, the Genesis version, and the X68000 version. So this one's from Stage 1. It's called Not All There. It's composed by Shizuyoshi Okamura, Masaki Kase, and Megumi Matsuura. Here we go. Alright, that was the original Neo Geo version, and this is the Genesis version, which was released in '94 from the same composers. You were listening to the Genesis version of Not All There from Viewpoint. That was released in '94. This next version is from the X68000, released 1 year later in 1995. Now the composers for this one were not credited, but I'm led to believe they were the same original composers from the original track. So, that was an interesting set of music.
Yeah.
One of the rare occurrences on these shows where the original kicks butt, and I don't know, the other two, what are your thoughts on the other two?
Okay, so, well, let me talk about the original first. So, I really like the original. It's very laid back, it's very chill, and you could go for like a Sunday drive, just driving around, bright sun in the sky, feel the warmth on your face, top down.
You're really painting a good picture.
I am, yeah. You know, it's like really laid back and really like just a very chill track. The Genesis version, oh my god, those synths are terrible.
They could really have benefited from a better sound driver, I think.
The harsh tones in the Genesis worked really well for heavy metal and hard rock music and even dance music. This track is so laid back and so like, you gotta get jazz right on the Genesis. Like Side Pocket, for example. Perfect example of a soundtrack
kind of emulate a saxophone.
Right.
You gotta get those tones accurate.
Exactly. And with this, because the Genesis does what Nintendo don't, you can't, it's got the harsh tones, but you can't have that be representative in every single track that you put on the Genesis soundtrack.
And granted, I mean, the lead synth in the original song sounded like a square wave. You know, it was very flat, and it worked because the backbeat was so thick and organic, and you know, just that kind of like traditional '90s dance track backbeat. But when you don't have that alongside, you know, because like they couldn't put those samples in like the Genesis version, so you had these little tinny drums coupled with that kind of square wave emulated synth in the lead. It just altogether just sounds really messy.
Sounds really awful.
I don't know. What do you think about the kazoo version for the X68000?
Yeah, the harmonica or kazoo version. Yeah, no, the X68000 it normally has a really good sound. I really like it. I think the drums and the bass sounded good here. I did not like the synth though. It's just way too kazooey. Yeah. With less banjo.
No banjo kazooey.
No banjo kazooey references.
I'm going to be honest with you. The original track I played is actually from the Neo Geo CD version, not the Neo Geo version. They're identical tracks, however, in the Neo Geo CD version, the drum samples are a little bit clearer. It's not like compressed audio like it is in the Neo Geo. So there was the Neo Geo CD, the Neo Geo version, and the FM Towns Marty version. All use essentially the exact same music. So in any case, yeah, I really like the game. The game is kind of an isometric shoot 'em up. You kind of scroll upwards from left to right, and you've got a ship that just moves back and forth, and it's single plane. You don't really move up and down at all, but the enemies are all geometric shapes. Kind of looks like, I guess, an early version of like what Star Fox would look like if Star Fox were made completely of 2D sprites that want to be polygons instead of actual polygons that probably should have been sprites.
My big issue with having a shooter, having it being isometric, that's tough. Because shooters require such tight precision, and in isometric games, that's very hard to do. Yeah. Like if you played Sonic 3D Blast, for example, your jumping is just all over the place. Yeah. It's very slippery.
The good thing, at least on the Neo Geo, is that there was a lot of animation. You know, there were shadows underneath everything. Right. You got a pretty good idea of where you were in space. There were some kind of obstacle dodging areas where you'd run into walls because you thought you were 2 inches over from where you actually were. On the Genesis and X68000 versions, that kind of goes away because the definition isn't as good. So, and your hit detection's a little bit worse. So yeah, I'd say it's more difficult in that respect on those games, mainly because of design flaws and not necessarily because they increase the actual difficulty of the enemies or quicken the pace or anything like that. If you're gonna go seek out this game to play it, definitely head for the Neo Geo, the Neo Geo CD version. Right. It's the real true. You'll get the best sound, you get the best graphics, and the best gameplay out of all of them. For the soundtrack alone, this first stage music, that's called Not All There, was written by Megumi Matsuura, Masaki Kase, and Shizuyoshi Okamura. I think it's the best track on the soundtrack. The rest of the soundtrack all sounds pretty similar to this. Okay. But this one's really got that kind of groovy synth and that nice bridge that really hooks you, and you kind of like hum it for the rest of your day if you're playing it.
It's a great hip-bopping tune, definitely. Now, about these composers, these guys all work for Sammy?
For the most part, yeah. Megumi Matsuura has only Battle Blaze, Football Fury, and Viewpoint to his credit. Masaki Kase's got a little bit more, aside from Viewpoint and Football Fury and Battle Blaze. Also worked on the Creon Conquest. He did the music special effects.
NES.
Yeah. Fighting Masters. He did sound design for, worked on the background music and sound effects for Samurai Showdown, Shock Troopers, Shock Troopers Second Squad, and Irritating Stick, all for the Neo Geo. So it looks like he went to work for SNK after he ended up doing this with Sammy. And then did some composition for Beatmania, The Sound of Tokyo in 2001. And that was the last game he was credited for. Shizuyoshi Okamura, again, Football Fury and Battle Blaze, aside from Viewpoint. The only other song, or the only other soundtrack was Arkista's Ring, which was, I believe, a Nintendo game
That was,
as well, right?
yeah, that was Sammy. Yeah, that's right.
So he was credited for that. Well, not credited for that. He was an uncredited music composer for that game. So,
bummer, dude.
yeah, not a lot of these guys didn't really stay in the music industry, or at least in the video game composition industry, far beyond the early 2000s. I like that Shizuyoshi Okamura's nickname is Sizlla.
Sizlla.
S-I-Z-L-L-A. Sizlla.
He likes going to the Sizlla.
Eating some lobsters or something.
Sizzle me timbers.
I don't even know. Good gracious.
So I heard there's a PlayStation version, and you said it's terrible.
Well, the PlayStation version has completely redone graphics. It's actually polygonal.
Okay.
But the soundtrack is totally different. They completely ripped out all of the recognizable tracks and put all new music in. And it's your really generic, like, late 90s trance. It's got, like, no character to it.
Boots.
Yeah, it's just...
Boots and pants?
Yeah, I was hoping that, you know, oh cool, maybe there might be an updated version of the song that we can put into the the podcast, but...
Negative.
Sorely, it was not the case.
Word.
So, unfortunately, we couldn't play one from that because it's not the same music, but you can always check it out on YouTube if you want. You probably aren't missing much if you don't, though.
No.
I think that's going to bring us into our next game, which is one we're both intimately familiar with. Intimately.
Oh, yeah.
Quite. So, we're going to be talking about Undercover Cops.
Undercover Cops.
So, this was released originally in 1992 in the arcades. And
True story.
Came out in Japan first, was kind of misreleased in the US, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and then released 3 years later for the Super Famicom in the Land of the Rising Sun. So this is Redtailed Cat, which is Stage 3, composed by Takushi Hiyamuta. Was Undercover Cops, the arcade version, released in 1992. Coming up is the SNES version, released in 1995 for the Super Famicom.
The year is 2043. The Undercover Cops team, Zan, Matt, and Rosa, has been assembled in their commissioner's office for an important briefing.
All right, Undercover Cops. Thugs have taken over New York City and we need your help. Get out on the streets and beat the crap out of every living thing you see.
Even puppies?
Especially puppies, Matt. Look, these jackholes are everywhere. Down by the docks, in construction zones. Hell, I even found one in my wife this morning.
How did you get him out?
Never mind that. The point is, our city isn't safe, and you need to go undercover by walking the streets in broad daylight and committing acts of murder on suspected criminals. Got it?
But boss, that's not exactly undercover, is it?
We're, breaking the rules a bit here, Zan. Look, we got a maniacal cyborg, an insanely obese woman with a jackhammer, and a guy who's got the gall to call himself Gun Puncher terrorizing our streets. We don't have time to worry about semantics. Hello?
Hi, honey. Just wanted to remind you to let the dog out when you get home. Oh, and I'm running away to Mexico with Gun Puncher. Have a great life!
Son of a... This is getting out of hand. Undercover Cops, it's go time. Now get out there and find the guy who did my wife. I mean, bring this city to justice.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to PixelTunes Radio. That was from Undercover Cops. The song was called Redtailed Cat, and that is stage 3 of the game.
Correct.
This is a fantastic beat 'em up, which I've actually reviewed on Dude You Haven't Played This Game. It was the season 3 opener, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out.
Yeah, Mike and I were both in that video.
We were both in that video, and that was a great episode. And I gotta say, the SNES version is my favorite.
Hands down, dude.
Yeah.
It's like an enhanced remix of the arcade version. And I guess Takushi Hiyamuta had, 3 years in between the arcade and the Super Famicom version to, work on the soundtrack. So I guess he really dug in deep and really pulled all he could out of that SPC chip.
I just think the Super Nintendo just sounds better because it's the Super Nintendo.
Don't be all fanboy about it. No, I mean, you could definitely tell that the arcade version was made on an FM synth.
Absolutely.
It didn't have a lot of the synth hits,
right.
A lot of the vocal samples. I know there were a lot of vocal samples like during the battles in the arcade, like there were voices and stuff. So I guess a lot of that stuff was kind of allocated for the fighting. So they didn't really have any vocal sample memory left for the actual tracks themselves, or there just weren't enough, sample channels to have them overlaying each other. On the Super Nintendo, I don't think there were as many vocal samples during the fighting.
Right.
So they kind of dropped them into the music.
Yeah, they were in
instead.
the songs. Yeah. The quality of the vocals were still really impressive though, because on a Super Nintendo, you don't really get a lot of that, the PCM samples with the audio, and so they kind of dropped it into the songs themselves just so it would fit, and I don't think they overused it at all. I think it sounds really tight and really clean, and to have that intermingled in with the actual soundtrack itself is really impressive for a Super Nintendo track.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said before, Hiyamuta really knew how to get the most he could out of a Super Nintendo chip, because he also composed one of my other favorite Super Nintendo soundtracks, Super R-Type, which we played way back on our Shoot 'em Ups episode.
Right.
And he just, he has this really awesome New Jack Swing, very contemporary sound for that age that these games came out.
I was about to say contemporary back in the 90s. Not so much a New Jack Swing on the radio nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
I love those synth hits though on the Super Nintendo. Just like they're just so tight and dun 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 dun.
Yeah, very Konami-ish.
Very Konami-ish, yes.
Kind of reminds me of the Gradius 3 soundtrack and stuff like that.
It's just like Ninja Turtles in Time, like all that awesome Super Nintendo music that Konami was putting out back then. Sunset Riders, really good stuff.
So it was kind of weird to hear that kind of stuff coming out of an IREM game. Hiyamuta went on to do all of the Metal Slug, or most of the Metal Slug games. He's probably most popular for doing those, but I still think this is probably one of his best soundtracks out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. The problem with the Metal Slug soundtracks is they're designed to be atmospheric to...
They're not as memorable.
Right.
There's some cool stuff.
They're orchestral. I mean, you know, mostly.
Yes, but in the later games, like the
5.
zombie levels, there's some really hard rocking
Really
tunes
good
in those games, and really memorable stuff
metal stuff.
But the first, like, 3 games, I think, Metal Slug 1, Metal Slug 2, Metal Slug X, yeah, it's a lot of just kind of background music, kind of marchy music that didn't really grab me as much as, like, Super R-Type or Undercover Cops did.
Every track from Undercover Cops is just fantastic. It's a really great soundtrack, and this is one of my favorites, so it's good stuff.
There's a really interesting history about the US arcade version that you probably didn't even know about.
I probably didn't.
So they released the Japanese version and it was doing very well, so IREM decided to bring it over to the US. For some reason, whether it was an oversight on somebody's part or it was a conscious decision, they released an unfinished version in the American arcades.
Oh, I knew that, yeah.
So there were some graphics missing, there were even moves missing, like they didn't have their dash jump moves. So
that was added in.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't, it didn't make the game as playable or as fun as the original game. So the game was doing only moderately well in the US, not as well as in Japan, so IREM themselves released kits called, what was it? It was Undercover Cops Alpha Master version or something like that.
There was a secondary version that came out.
And it basically brought it up to the finished version that the Japanese version was, although also had the, you know, English translation and the English names and all that. So there were very few of those kits ever released because the arcade owners just didn't bother, because I don't think they even realized there was anything missing from the game in the first place.
Well, that's the problem with arcades is, you know, they were treating arcades back then, especially like post Street Fighter 2 era, I guess you could say like downloadable content in a way, because they were like, oh, let's just remake this old version and we'll put some new moves in, we'll change some of the
they got popular with like Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition with these add-on enhancement kits that you can add to existing boards.
But they didn't have internet back then, so there was no communication from fans to, you know, to the company, to like Konami or Capcom or whoever is making these games, to be like, hey, you need to balance this better, you need to make this better. You know, that's why the whole thing with in Street Fighter 2, the guile,
the handcuff trick.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in arcade games. So these owners, most mom and pop places, you know, the average 7-Eleven that had these games, they're not going to update this stuff.
Why am I going to spend more money on making a game barely enhanced? You know?
Exactly.
All they see is a different title screen.
Right.
So it was a shame. So, you know, really the only way to play this game nowadays is in MAME if you want to play the arcade version. So if you're looking at it, you want to play the game in English, you want to get the real good version of the game to play, go with that alpha version over the original US version that you might be able to download.
Right, if you were talking about the arcade, but the Super Famicom version that came out...
That has all the moves that the latest version did.
Yeah, and so for you US listeners, or even European listeners, you can score copies of the game on eBay. Totally worth it. I mean, the game sells on eBay. If you get a real version of the game, you're looking at $200 just to play it on the Super Famicom. So just get a repro version of it. Trust me, it's worth the money to import that instead.
Those Undercover Cops.
I'm telling you.
I tell you, man.
They're so silly.
Unbelievable.
They're so undercover.
They should be more cheap.
And more cop-like.
And less cop-like.
Less cop-like?
Yes.
Why less cop-like?
Because then we wouldn't have to pay them as much. They'd be crooked.
So crooked undercover cops.
Yeah. Okay. Because they're making their money elsewhere, so we wouldn't have to pay so much for their game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rosa has the flying kicks, the flying butt bombs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Speaking of...
butt bombs?
Speaking of crazy female battlers, our next game coming up is the infamous Golden Axe.
So infamous.
Released by Sega way back in the Dizzle.
Yes. So this track is called Wilderness, and we're going to listen to four different versions. The arcade version, and then the Genesis version, the Commodore 64 version, and the Sega Ages version, which was on the PS2. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the original version. Came out on the arcade. This released in 1989, and again, this track is called Wilderness. was Golden Axe Wilderness on the arcade. This is the Sega Genesis version, also released in 1989. Now we're going to listen to the Commodore 64 version that released in 1990. Finally, we'll be listening to the PS2 or PlayStation 2 version from the Sega Ages collection. And this is Golden Axe Wilderness from 2003.
Hello there, my name is Axe Battler.
And I'm Tyrus Flare.
And today, I'm here to tell you about a little shop we've opened up. It's called the Golden Axe Bikini Shop.
Are you tired of the summer heat bogging you down? Plan on taking on the Death Adder and need the appropriate wardrobe? Well, look no further than Golden Axe Bikini Shop. Here comes a customer now.
Hello there. Oh, aren't you two just the bee's knees? My name is Solomon Wire III, and I'm looking for a bikini bottom from my great-grandson to join the fight against Death Adder and his minions. I've got just the thing here. It's purple, which is for royalty such as yourself. 20 gold pieces, please. Thank you, Sonny. Anytime.
My name is Helena Mage. I am a warrior who is taking a brief hiatus from my fight against the Death Adder, and I require only the finest chainmail bikini so I can get right back to destroying evildoers. Right this way, honey.
Hi. I'm looking for a swimsuit, maybe something in green. I'm headed to the beach and I forgot my suit and I wanted to...
Excuse me, but are you planning on fighting the Death Adder?
Who? No, I'm on a summer vacation with my wife, Susan. We drove through some strange cave, ended up in front of your shop, and I thought, oh, perfect. I needed to stop and get...
Get out! Get out of our store! Those who don't fight the Death Adder are enemies of mine!
Whoa! I'm reporting you to the Better Business Bureau. You're crazy!
speaking of crazy, our prices are low, low, low.
So come on down to the Golden Axe Bikini Shop, but only if you're going to fight against the Death Adder!
The Golden Axe Bikini Shop does not accept any form of payment other than gold coins. Bags of potions or magic are accepted, but the owners have to beat the living tar out of you if you're carrying said bag. Void in Wisconsin, no CODs. Welcome back, that was Golden Axe, and the track was called Wilderness. Yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah, one of my favorites from the soundtrack, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. So the game originally came out in 1989. So there were two people that wrote the original track on the arcade, and then there were 3 people that apparently converted it over to the Genesis.
Well, yeah, Tōru Nakabayashi wrote most of the original soundtrack for the arcade version, and then Takada was the sole composer specifically of the Wilderness track.
Okay, alright. It was translated over to the Genesis by Nankyoku, Deki, and Imaki.
Right.
Which I'm
Unfortunately,
sure
those are all aliases.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell on the internet, we don't know who those actual composers were. You know, whether they were just hired by Sega for this particular game, or whether they were, you know, Sega composers that went on to do other stuff. But unfortunately, their names remain shrouded in mystery.
It could have honestly just been the original composers just going by anonymous names that, you know, was very common back then.
Very possible. Very possible.
So, and then the third version, the, in my opinion, best version, which we'll get into in a minute, was actually done by Redtailed, and he did the Commodore 64 version. And then there's Makoto Lida, who did the PS2 Sega Ages version.
Correct. Now let's start from the top. So,
yes,
the arcade version.
I don't like it. It's my least favorite.
It's very FM synthy.
Yeah, but I like FM synth. I just think that this is too plain.
It's, yeah, I agree. It's probably the most orchestral sounding.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's very orchestral.
So on the Genesis version, you know, they really kind of, even though those synth lead parts are nearly identical, they kind of danced up the beat a little bit. So it gives it a much more driving, energetic feel to it, which is much more appropriate, I think, for a beat 'em up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the drums really add a lot of strong force to the actions that you're doing in the game. So I agree. The Genesis version is definitely better than the arcade version. It's not that the arcade version is bad. It needed something, and the Genesis version definitely gave it what it needed.
Conversely, I think, though, the arcade version of the game is better than the Genesis version of the game. So, you know, that's just my opinion.
I'm just thinking, I've played the arcade version once, because, you know, trying to find these games in the arcade is next to impossible, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think back in the day, at some point in time, I maybe played it once and then was like, whatever.
They used to have one in a bowling alley really close to me when I was a kid, so...
I only played this like once, but the Genesis version I'm pretty familiar with.
So you'd say you like the Genesis version better than the arcade, or you just don't remember enough to...
Both the game, I would say, and the soundtrack. I think the Genesis version is better.
It's okay to be wrong.
It's okay to be wrong. No, it's just that, you know, maybe I would have to go back and play the arcade version again to really kind of understand the difference between the two. But I'm so much more familiar with the Genesis version that I'm not afraid to bleed nostalgia in this.
Yeah, no, I agree. The graphics in the arcade version, I think, were a little better. They were a little more textured. There were like light sources that you could kind of discern shining on the characters and such. The graphics were a little bit flatter in the Genesis. And I think the sprites were a little bit smaller. But again, you know, it's all, if you grew up playing that game, you're going to know the mechanics of that game better than you will the arcade version. So I didn't have a Genesis until much, much later on, like after the Sega CD got released. So
oh no, I didn't get a Genesis until college.
I think we could probably both agree, though, that the Commodore 64 version is not nearly as good as either of the two.
Well, no, not nearly as good. God, the game is terrible.
Yes.
Man.
I mean, you can't expect much from the Commodore 64 when you're trying to recreate an arcade beat-em-up atmosphere.
But man, oh, it was just miserable to play that game. So we had a little beat-em-ups day, I guess you could say, yesterday, and we kind of all
got a bunch of people together.
Got a bunch of people together, played some games. It's like, let me boot up the C64 version so you can take a look at it. I was like, all right. So start playing it. Oh my god. Just, the control was horrible. You would like go to attack the guy and he'd be behind you beating the ever-living stuffing out of you, and you couldn't turn around because you're in the middle of a combo or getting annihilated. And
this is only with one enemy on the screen at a time.
Right. Like, it's not good. It's not good. The music, however, is fan-friggin-tastic.
Yes.
This version of the song is unbelievable. Really good stuff. Expecting nothing less from your own Tell is impossible.
Of course, because, you know, the Commodore 64 was Tell's bread and butter.
Right.
So that's why I like this Wilderness song so much, is that this melody is just so basic and so fun that you can kind of turn it into whatever you want.
Right.
So you can get a symphonic sound out of it, you can get a dance sound out of it, you can even get a rock sound out of it if you really wanted to. But he really just kind of twisted this into a really good chiptune song, added his own intro to it, and then even the breakdown as it goes on, it just gets so thick and textured for a sound chip that only has 3 channels. It's like mind-boggling what he does with this stuff.
The Commodore 64 and the Amiga both really had this building atmosphere that you could use with the sound drivers and with the sound font and everything. It just, you could build so much on top of what you were kind of like creating these exceptionally long and drawn out songs that just kept building. Very similar to Jim Power with Chris Hulsbeck. That intro song just keeps building and building and building, and you're like, when's it gonna end? And it never ends. It's just like a 6-minute eargasm.
And a lot of that was, you know, created by, you know, more intense arpeggios and building up that pulse width modulation and just kind of making that sound bigger and bigger. Speaking of which, there is a Amiga version of this game, composed by David Whittaker, and I took a listen to it because I was considering, you know, throwing it in the podcast as well, but I was kind of disappointed with it. It sounded a lot like the original arcade version, but actually it sounded a little bit more like the PS2 version. But it was kind of just like flat and synthy, like he didn't really do too much with it. It was a very solid composition in its own right, but I don't think it really added anything that would, you know, kind of set it apart from any of the other compositions that we've listened to.
I think that if we were to play devil's advocate and say, hey, what if this ever came out on a Super Nintendo? I think they would go with a more rock or orchestral feel to it.
I feel like more orchestral, probably.
Probably.
Using kind of like the Super Ghouls and Ghosts sound font or something like that. There's also a TurboGrafx 16 CD version of Golden Axe, which sounds a lot like the PS2 version as well, but even more synthy. So a lot of the people were going for that kind of symphonic feel, and I think like the PS2, the Sega Ages version, they were kind of trying to figure out what the original arcade version of the song would have sounded like had it been composed in 2003.
In modern
kind of
hardware.
Took even the beat and the tempo and the feel of the song and kind of modernized it into, you know, modern instruments.
Without
more accurate synthesized orchestra.
And it's not bad. It's a good version of the song. It's probably my second favorite too. Well, no, I'd say third favorite because the Genesis version has that really nice dance drums to it.
It's too bad they totally mucked the game up though. The Sega Ages collection, officially called Sega Ages 2500. Golden Axe Volume 5, I think, is the full name of the game. And it's called 2500 because it was 2,500 yen. It was about $25. You can pick the games up for half price. Essentially, the game looks like it was a PlayStation 1 game, just kind of upscaled in resolution for the PS2.
We played a version from the last episode that we did for Same Song, Different System.
Space Harrier.
We did Space Harrier from Sega Ages.
And
some of the Sega Ages games did come out. I don't think it was called the Sega Ages Collection. I think it was Classics Collection or something like that. And that was pretty cool. I mean, it was cool to play one of the better versions of Alien Syndrome. Because Alien Syndrome has had so many ports over the years, but the version that they put on the Sega Ages was actually pretty good.
And unfortunately the Ages series was kind of hit or miss. There was some good stuff and there was some not so good stuff. However, in the PS2 version, it was just the combat stunk. If an enemy was too far away from you, he would run and like jump kick you, like do a dash kick. There was no way to avoid it. You get knocked down every single time. So you'd walk a little bit, an enemy would come in from the left and an enemy would come in from the right. And if you walk too far to the right, the enemy on the left would dash you.
Be cool if
and
it was
you would
like
fall over.
Batman Returns.
It's like
you can grab both of them and just smash their heads together.
But essentially, you had to stay in the middle of the screen, let both of them come to you, and then you can't attack in two directions at once. So while you were attacking one, the other one would hit you anyway. So it just, for a game that wasn't trying to take your quarters, it didn't really have any kind of forgiving aspect to it in combat. So you didn't miss much by not getting it over in the US.
There was no real super move, if I recall, in Golden Axe.
Well, there was the magic.
There's
But
no
there
magic.
wasn't like a spin move like Final
Right.
Fight had, where you could mash both
Exactly.
buttons and get out of something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the PS2 version did add a back attack kind of move, where you would hit enemies on both sides, but it took so long from the button press to the actual attack that the enemy would get you by the time you realized you're surrounded.
Wow.
Very unfortunate. How about the composers of the original track?
Yes.
Anything else they did?
So, Tōru Nakabayashi, such a mouthful, he did work on Virtua Racing, of course, Golden Axe, and did sound design on Scramble Spirits. He was thanked in Die Hard Arcade and Victory Goal 96, but we don't really know what he did there. Maybe
Probably
some-
brought them like Subway or Dairy Queen or something.
Yeah, you know. Yo Takada worked on a couple different games. Worked on Game Ground, did the music there. Great game.
Yep.
Really good music. Very symphonic as well. So a lot of the stuff from Golden Axe kind of transitioned very well into Game Ground. Not the same tracks, obviously, whole new tracks, but that sound worked really well. And then did E-SWAT, City Under Siege, which also came out on the Genesis.
Right. And so we've talked about Euro Intel a million times before,
Right.
so pick a game from the Commodore 64 and chances are he's worked on it.
RoboCop 3. Oh,
And RoboCop
so-
3, of course. We won't go too much into him. As far as Makoto Lida, who did sound for the PS2 version of the game, he did a lot of the Sega Ages games. So he did, aside from Golden Axe, did Fantasy Zone, Outrun, Hakuto no Ken, which is a Fist of the North
Fist of the
Star,
North Star, right.
and Afterburner 2 versions of the Sega Ages games. So he worked on the sound for all of those. Before that, he did Resident Evil Survivor 2, Code Veronica for the PlayStation.
We worked on a bunch of Digimon games as well.
Yeah, Digimon Adventure 2.
And Digimon Adventure 1.
Also, Sega Marine Fishing, which had a pretty good soundtrack. He was the sound director on that one. And Prisoner of Ice.
Never heard of that one.
That was his first game, and that was a game developed by Infogrames. Came out on the PlayStation and the Saturn. A lot of different composers worked on this game, and I guess because the game was so popular, it came out on so many different systems, you're going to get kind of an eclectic mix of composers, so you're going to get an eclectic mix of music coming out of those composers.
Right. But I think we're both in agreement that the Commodore 64 version blows all the other versions out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Definitely the most enjoyable of them all. All your songs are belong to us with our next track.
Yeah, we're gonna play a track from Zero Wing, and this track is from the first stage. The track is, well, the level is called Natolls, which I'm assuming that is the place that you're traveling through.
Yes.
The song is called Open Your Eyes. Tatsuya Uemura did the composition of this specific track. The entire soundtrack he also worked on along with Toshiaki Tomisawa and Masahiro Yuge. So let's go ahead and listen to Open Your Eyes. This is from the arcade version, and it came out in 1989. And now we're going to be listening to the Sega Mega Drive version, which is really the Genesis, but it never came out in the US. This is from the 1991 release of Zero Wing. now we're going to listen to the PC Engine version. All right, welcome back. That was from Zero Wing, and that last part that we listened to, that last version, I guess I could say, is from the PC Engine version, also known as the TurboGrafx CD in America.
Talk about a last-minute addition to the podcast.
Yeah, seriously.
We were talking about the game during the break, and we were looking up some stuff, and I happened to notice there was a PC Engine CD version, so we checked out the soundtrack, and we thought it was pretty good, so we decided to throw it in the podcast.
Why not?
Unfortunately for that version, we couldn't get a composer. I can't find one anywhere.
Yeah.
I even looked at the ending of the game, which there's a video of on YouTube, and after the ending cutscene, it literally just goes right back to the title screen, so there's no credits whatsoever.
Pretty strange.
So, you know, if I find one between now and when we publish this podcast, I'll throw it in with the credits, but if I can't, if anyone out there can clue me in on who wrote the soundtrack for the PC Engine CD version specifically, let me know. Because the original version was written by Tetsuya Uemura and Toshiaki Tomisawa and Masahiro Yuki, as we already stated.
Yes. So as far as the different versions, difference between them, I mean, these are quite varied. Mega Drive version is still my favorite, but the arcade version, I don't know, not really feeling the synths on it.
Gotta disagree with you there, man. I think the arcade version is better.
I know.
I think the arcade version has a little bit brighter sound, where it brings a little bit more attention to the melody. And while I am usually a big drum and percussion guy, I thought that the Genesis version, or the Mega Drive's version's percussion was just a little too strong and kind of detracted from the rest of the song.
That's actually my favorite part of the Mega Drive version, is how strong and tight the drums sound. You know, it's got that really crisp, tight snare, and even the toms sound really good. The tom drums on this sound really good, and it just has a really nice sound to it. Definitely very similar sound drivers to games like Hellfire.
Yep, absolutely.
So very similar.
I think that was a Toadplan game too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And then the PC Engine version, very synthy. You know, really like.
I like the like power orchestra style. I would have liked to have maybe heard some like electric guitar chugging along in the background or something. I thought that might have added a little bit to it. But I like that it was a very different take on the original soundtrack.
Yeah, this version sounded very Castlevania-ish, possibly
like Rondo of Blood.
Right, using the same sound drivers. I was just going to say it's Rondo of Blood.
Coincidentally, Tetsuya Uemura also wrote the Hellfire soundtrack, so it's probably where you're getting that similarity from.
So, I mean, you've also got quite a bit of distance in terms of the time period that these games came out with, as far as when they were released. The arcade version came out in 1989. Mega Drive version came out in 91, and the PC Engine version came out in 92. So, you know, got a couple of years difference between them, so they had some time to kind of deliver, you know, what do we want the song to sound like in this version? Oh, let's have it, you know, give it tighter drums than the previous version. All right, what do we want the next version to sound like? Let's make it synthy. Let's make it, you know, power orchestra. So
the games themselves, though, were almost identical translations to each other. The graphics are very, very similar. Even on the PC Engine, you know, it didn't have that 68,000 processor behind it, so
Right.
they couldn't really just port the graphics and everything directly. But the art style is very, very similar. It's not as yellow tinged, I think, as the arcade and Genesis versions were, but overall, I mean, everything looked pretty similar to each other.
And the graphics actually are a little different in terms of the cutscenes. So the big, you know, we've talked about Zero Wing before when we played the Shoot 'em Ups episode, and when we picked I think it was the second stage track that we played in that episode. Yeah. So we've already kind of talked about Zero Wing in the past, but as you know, the game became an internet meme sensation back in, I don't know, 2001, maybe 2002.
Probably around there.
Yeah, around the early 2000s for the "All your base are belong to us" quote for the broken English or English that is very heavy in this game. And so the PC Engine version actually has cutscenes that are actually fully with voiceover and better animation, right?
Completely in Japanese, which is a shame.
course.
If it had come out over here, I would have loved to have heard English dialogue from
Can you imagine
the Genesis version.
on the Turbo Duo CD, or really the Turbo Graphics CD, whatever you want to call it, having like the same people that worked on like Valis 3.
How are you, gentlemen?
Yeah. All your base are belong to us. So I think that'd be really funny to hear, but unfortunately we did not get it in the States.
No, but we got
Actually,
the Laziest Man on Mars version, which was pretty good.
That is true. I mean, unfortunately we didn't get any version of this game in the States. I believe that Europe got the Mega Drive version.
Well, Williams did produce the American version for the arcade.
So there was an arcade version that came out in America, and it also had butchered English as well, right?
I don't believe that the arcade version had those cutscenes. Those were specifically for the
Those
Mega
were for
Drive
the Mega
version.
Drive. Huh. How about that?
Yeah, and then they just enhanced them further for the PC Engine
Zero
version.
Wing is a great game. It's a really good shooter.
Yeah, you know, from all the jokes that are made about it, hiding behind it is a game that's really worthwhile to play.
Really fun, and the rest of the music is excellent. So even though you can point and laugh at the English, the game itself is well worth owning. So it's worth importing. I mean, you can get it on eBay now, complete in box, for like $50.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
Or you can get the arcade version for probably like $350.
No, way more than that.
You think so?
Yeah.
It depends.
I mean, you know...
Arcade cabinets that aren't like really sought after, if you get it from like an arcade and it's got some wear and tear on it, you're looking at $350. You know,
Yeah.
if you're looking for like something, a reseller that has refurbished the arcade unit and it's back to like brand new looking, sure, you're going to be paying between $5,000 and $3,000 depending on the game itself. So, but if you want to buy just the board from eBay, this game only goes for like $20, $30.
Yeah. I think it'd just be easier and I really don't like emulation, but I think it'd just be easier just to do a MAME arcade cabinet, throw a computer in the cabinet and do that.
I'd love to do that someday.
That'd be awesome. That'd be
Get
sweet.
an arcade cab going.
Yeah.
Have a PixelTunes marquee on the top.
Yeah, you know.
Pictures of you and me on the side.
Holding hands.
Your side will be the Nintendo version, and my side will be the Sharp X68000 version. And
But they'll both be holding hands.
yeah,
The systems
and
will be holding
microphones.
hands. And microphones.
Just giving epic knuckles to each other.
The
Fist bumps.
systems would be giving epic knuckles. We would be holding hands.
Aww.
Aw.
Aww.
I'm
Gross.
sorry.
Can't hold
Gross.
hands and play video games at the same time.
You don't play video games right then.
Alright, you've officially table flipped.
Oh boy. So yeah, I like this track. I think it's really good. I mean, no matter what version you're listening to, but yeah, not really a fan of the arcade version. Sorry. I know you're a big fan of it. Mega Drive version all the way with PC Engine in second place.
I'm not gonna say I'm a huge fan of the arcade version.
You're a huge fan.
I'd say the majority of the tracks from this game, I do prefer the Genesis version.
Okay.
This particular track, however,
Okay.
I prefer the arcade version.
Gotcha.
Just my personal opinion.
All right, so as far as the composers for this game, we have talked about them before, but we'll do a quick run through. Tatsuya Uemura worked on Flying Shark, Tiger Heli, Hellfire, as we said before, Twin Cobra, Outzone, and of course, Zero Wing. Believe it or not, he worked on the game that we're talking about.
No kidding.
Shocker. Next guy, Toshiaki Tomisawa, worked on Zero Wing, of course, Vimana, and Fix 8. And last but not least, Masahiro Yuge worked on a bunch of different stuff. He worked on a game called Same.
Same, same.
No, Same.
Okay,
Yeah.
you want to do that.
Come on now. Come on, son. Worked on Giga Wing a little bit later on in 1999. and of course VV, also known as V5. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about these guys in the past, not really gonna go into too much detail about it, but that is pretty much it. So we're going from Zero Wing to Zero's theme. And this game that we're about to play a little song from is from Mega Man X3. We only have 2 versions of the song, the Super Nintendo version and the PlayStation/Saturn version. So this track was composed by Kinuyo Yamashita, and the PlayStation 1 Saturn arrangements were done by Toshihiko Horiyama, Shusaku Uchiyama, and Yoshino Aoki. So here is the original version from Kinuyo Yamashita. Listen to the Super Nintendo version of Mega Man X3's Zero theme. That version came out in 1995. Here's the PlayStation and Saturn version from 1996. Alright, that was the Mega Man X3 Zero theme from the PlayStation 1 or PSX and Saturn versions, which don't believe came out in the United States.
Oh, they didn't?
Yeah,
I didn't even
it
know.
came out in Japan. You know why? Because the soundtrack blows.
Okay,
Not
you can go with that.
I love the Super Nintendo version. I remember playing this way back in the day when the game came out, and I always loved those X games. The first 3 were great. I liked the 4th one. After that, I kind of lost interest. I was like, meh, whatever. They added all these weird characters in and just tried to make it like Sonic the Hedgehog, where it's just like, let's put as many characters in as we can to give it variety, and it really just didn't work. But anyways, the Super Nintendo version of these tracks specifically, written by Kinuyo Yamashita, just has a lot of power, a lot of energy to them. And I kind of feel like that was lost in the version that came out a year later that was arranged just to be different. I don't know. I guess they were just trying to take advantage of maybe the bigger, better hardware. And so they were like, let's throw some synth in, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird to having a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation arrangement of that song like 1 year after each other. It's such a late Super Nintendo game and such an early PlayStation game, so I don't really know if that really happened very much.
Yeah, it didn't.
Having a port of a Super Nintendo game like directly to a Saturn and PlayStation platform.
There was a lot of that, but it was mostly like sports games.
Well, yeah, of course.
Because that always happened where, you know, sports games would continue to come out on the old versions.
But it wasn't
They
a
sold
direct...
really well.
It wasn't a direct port, though.
Right.
Like in the case of Mega Man X3, they're 2 2D games. You know, the art was almost identical to each other in each game.
Yeah, they didn't do much with the art.
Yeah, exactly. With the sports games, you're going from, you know, polygonal and sprite-based, and so they're like the same rosters, but as far as gameplay goes, you're not really duplicating too much.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a unique kind of a situation where you're getting a direct port from one of like a 4th gen platform to a 5th gen platform.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. The big, like I said before, the big issue that I have with the PlayStation and Saturn version is the synths that they use were very happy sounding, very pop, like J-pop, with a mixture of these like really bright horns. that just didn't enunciate the power and the strength that the Super Nintendo version had. I mean, there was tons of tracks on this game that just had a lot of oomph to them, a lot of really strong guitars. I mean, you have to also keep in mind, the Super Nintendo version had 4 guitars in it. It had 2 rhythm guitars that had 2 different octaves going at the same time, and then you had the lead synth, or the lead guitars, which also had 2 different octaves going at the same time. So you've got a lot of power in there with those guitars.
That's way too many guitars.
Oh, it's so good though. It is so good.
See,
and you know what?
I like the PlayStation version because I feel like it's more textured and it's got a little more depth to it.
Oh, I completely disagree. Like, okay, so the Super Nintendo version has, and you can go through, and I've talked about this before in the past, if you play around with the Super Nintendo emulators, you can hear the difference between the 2, or the 4 different guitars that they use. One of the guitars that they use is actually more of a synth in a lot of ways, so it kind of like mirrors.
Sounds almost like a triangle wave.
Yeah,
from
a little bit.
From the NES.
It's really cool though to like break down each guitar and listen to the octaves, especially with these Mega Man X games, because they did a lot of layering where they would put a guitar and then they would put like another guitar right on top of it, but they would make it so that it was delayed a little bit, like the time signatures were delayed slightly.
Like an echo effect.
Right, right. And you had a lot of that, which kind of made it so that these songs, the guitars specifically, kind of galloped on top of one another, which was really cool. I don't know, I just really like it.
It's cool.
Yeah.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Listen,
I'm not, you know...
Ed, it's okay to be wrong.
Of course. I'm not really familiar with the game to begin with.
Right.
I played Mega Man X, I think I rented it, got most of the way
first
through
one?
it. I was just like, whatever.
Yeah.
I never really got into Mega Man that much aside from Mega Man 2. So, like I said, I didn't grow up with this song.
Right.
So I don't have that nostalgia that you have for it. So, you know, when you picked this track for the podcast, it was like my first time listening to both. So just listening to it, like, you know, I probably have heard it because I have played these songs before in the past.
Okay.
But you know, people have requested them when I've put them on my website and such. But I don't go around listening to the Mega Man X3 soundtrack. So you know, it was just more like an unfamiliarity with it. So listening to both at the same time, I'm like, well, I kind of like that the Saturn PlayStation version is a little more modern sounding, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I agree.
And I'm also not a big fan of those guitar sounds on the SNES. Anyway, I mean, I've talked about that in the past. I really prefer like the FM synth guitar sound. They're a little too tinny for my ears, I think.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Saturn version kind of got rid of that kind of ear-piercing personal preference.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Disagree on this one.
It's definitely a personal preference. I just loved the harmonizing that the guitars all did with one another. And so I think I began to appreciate it even more when I learned how they constructed everything. And so to see, and I haven't broken down this particular track, but you know, I've played like Mega Man X before, and I did a video where I broke down the guitar stuff for each track. And it's just really cool to see them layer all these different guitars on top of one another and what they sound like when they all come together. It's just such a full, rich sound that I think the Super Nintendo had the ability to do, where they were able to work with individualized instruments and tailor make them and combine them so that they all sounded really fresh. Whereas with the Genesis, I kind of feel like they're like, I don't know, let's just take all this mess of sound and just construct it into something that's really distorted and crunchy. I personally really like all the work that Capcom did with the Mega Man X soundtracks on the Super Nintendo. Not to say that they didn't do a great job with X4. Haven't really had that much experience with X5, X6, and we're not even going to talk about X7 because that game is garbage. So, but you know, we've talked about Kinuyo Yamashita before in the past. She's worked on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the first Castlevania, and you know, we're not going to beat it to death. We've played tons and tons of tracks from her. We love her. She's an awesome composer. But we'll talk a little bit about the arrangers. So Toshihiko Horiyama worked on actually Mega Man X, Mega Man X3 and X4, so he was responsible for that. Demon's Crest, which was a great Super Nintendo game. Worked on Rockman and Forte, also known as Mega Man and Bass in the US. Worked on Capcom Generations, The Misadventures of Tron Bonne. He did sound design on Onimusha Warlords and Onimusha 2. He worked with a couple other composers on. He's mostly done very Capcom Japanese type soundtracks. Phoenix Wright, he did the newest Phoenix Wright game, Ace Attorney Dual Destinies on the 3DS rather. Ghost Trick, which was a fun little, like, I guess you could say Phoenix Wright type of game in terms of like the art design and the style and everything. Really cool game.
Cool.
And he did production assistance on that. So he's kind of been all over the place. Worked on tons of Mega Man and Capcom related stuff. Shusaku Uchiyama worked on mostly Mega Man and Resident Evil.
It's kind of a weird combination.
Yeah, you've got this like very happy, you know, like
Japanese action music.
Japanese action music mixed with these very like ambient tones.
Japanese survival horror music.
Yeah, basically. Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil Director's Cut. Devil May Cry, worked on sound with that. Also did the music for Piano 3, which was a very underrated
that was a good little game.
GameCube exclusive. Worked on Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry 4. We're skipping a bunch of stuff here, but you know, he's worked on mostly Resident Evil and Mega Man. He also did the music for Mega Man 10, which, I'm sorry, it's not really that great of a soundtrack. Anyways, Yoshino Aoki is also a lifer for Capcom. Worked on Breath of Fire 3, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix. He did all the console versions of those.
Breath of Fire 3 was really good.
I haven't played the only one.
I'm talking about the soundtrack. I haven't actually played the game.
Oh, you haven't played
but
the
they
game.
kind of, it's a very contemporary sounding soundtrack.
Okay.
It's more like Mother 3 than it is like Final Fantasy style.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
Interesting. Breath of Fire 4 worked on some of the Battle Network games for Mega Man Battle Network 2, 3, and 6. Then later worked on Shadow of Rome, which was a pretty interesting Capcom game.
Yeah.
Worked on some other Japanese-based games, Shiki T, and also did a track on Half Minute Hero, which very similar to Super Smash Brothers, everybody's worked on. And worked on Half Minute Hero The Second Coming, which I still haven't played. Have you played that?
I have not yet.
I want to check it out.
Not played it yet.
Yeah, I want to check it out. Mega Man Star Force, Mega Man Star Force 2, and Luminous Arc 2, which was a sequel to Luminous Arc 1.
Fancy.
So yeah, tons of games that these guys have worked on, mostly all for Capcom.
Yeah. Aoki was also a vocalist for Mega Man Battle and Chase, Breath of Fire 3, and Breath of Fire 4.
Which Mega Man Battle and Chase didn't come out in America.
Nope.
Well, we got a version of it in the Mega Man X collection. So there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Word. So that was Mega Man. And I guess we can move on to our next game, which is also a Capcom game, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Lots and lots. This is like an all-star soundtrack right
yeah.
here. This is 1943 Kai, originally released in the arcade in 1988. And so this is called Air Battle B, which plays during rounds 2 and 5. And this one was written, well, the soundtrack itself was written by Manami Matsume, Takashi Tataishi, Junko Tamiya, Hiroshige Tonomura, Tamayo Kawamoto, and Harumi Fujita. So talk about some big names.
Jeez, that's like half of Capcom's staff right
Seriously. So we'll talk about those after the break. Right now, here's the arcade version from 1988. was the arcade version. Get your ears ready for the PC Engine version. This was released in 1991. Once again, 1943, Kai Air Battle B.
Welcome back! That was the PC Engine version of 1943 Kai Midway Kaizen. And that track was Air Battle B round 2 and 5. So it plays on both rounds.
Yes, but it actually plays on round 2 and 8 on the PC Engine version.
Weird.
Well, there are extra stages added into the PC Engine version, so the soundtrack's a little rearranged, as they say.
Alright.
Ranged.
So this version came out in 1991. So, you know, like we said before about the Zero Wing soundtrack, they had a couple years to kind of figure out what they wanted to do with this.
Yeah. 1943 Kai is basically like
it's a vertical shooter, right?
Fantasy version of 1943.
Okay.
So where 1943 kind of attempted to use like period appropriate vehicles and weapons for like that era.
Right.
Kai was kind of like the same game, but added like lasers and force fields and some like futuristic. So it's like an alternate 1943. But then they also, you know, gave Kai its own soundtrack as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Capcom's real heavy hitters came out to contribute music to this game. Well, you want to play a little quiz?
Sure.
Here's a quiz.
Okay.
Since you're such a Capcom fan.
I am.
And a composer fan.
Word.
How about I give you a name of the composer, and you, off the top of your head, try to give me at least 2 games they've composed for.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
So Minami Matsume.
Okay. Mega Man 1. And, oh man, what's the name of that game? It is a racing game. Oh man, the soundtrack is really good, but it's really quiet.
What system was it for?
It was for the PC Engine.
Okay.
It was a TurboGrafx game.
Yeah.
F1 something.
F1 Dream.
F1 Dream, that's right.
Same year that 1943 Kai came out,
right.
actually,
okay.
1988. How about Takashi Tataishi? There's at least one in the series we just talked about before this.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Mega Man 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. And also one of your favorite shoot-em-ups.
UN Squadron.
Correct, the arcade version.
Right.
All right. You're like 1.5 for 2 here.
Okay.
Because you needed a little bit of help.
Yeah.
How about Junko Tamiya?
Oh, that's easy. Bionic Commando, the NES version. and Lil Nemo, the Dream Master.
Correct.
Word.
Also, Strider for the Genesis.
Right.
She's very popular for doing.
Yes.
Hiroshige Tonomura. We haven't talked about him, I don't think, yet.
I'm not gonna get any of this guy.
Guess. There's at least one.
Castlevania. No, just kidding.
No.
So, Capcom, let me think.
Capcom game.
Onimusha?
Capcom game was based on the Mega Man engine.
Okay. Okay.
Based on a popular cartoon.
Ooh. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
No, it was a Disney series.
Okay. Is it a movie license game?
No.
Okay, so not like Aladdin.
It's like an afternoon cartoon Disney game.
Like Tailspin?
Close.
Darkwing Duck? Chip and Dale?
So close. Oh my god, you're going to run.
DuckTales.
Yes.
Duke
finally.
Tales.
Good gracious.
Duke Tales.
So besides DuckTales, Hiroshige Tonomura also did Destiny of an Emperor.
It was like one of those like strategy games that nobody plays.
Yeah, basically.
One of those like Nobunaga's Ambition.
Hey man, that was a good game.
I'm not a fan of
very
strategy
statistic
games.
Oriented, but
Well, that's what I mean. Is any of those games where it's like stats? I don't know.
all right.
I'm
So
just
what
more
about
of an arcadey guy.
What about next question? Tamayo Kawamoto.
Oh man, no clue.
Well, one of them you are a guy that has armor on.
Okay, so Ghosts and Goblins,
Close.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts.
Back it up a little bit.
Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yes.
From Genesis. Yeah.
Actually, the arcade version.
Oh, okay.
And one more game. So I don't know if you're gonna get any of these, man. How about?
Do any of them have the words Mega or Super in them?
No.
I may not know.
You're probably not going to get any. So Tamayo Kawamoto also worked on the arcade version of Commando, Avengers, Section Z for the NES had a great soundtrack.
I've never played that game. Is that game good?
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah?
It's
It's
kind
a
of
shooter.
like, it's almost like a Metroid style shoot 'em up.
Don't say that. Now I gotta go buy
You
it.
there's a ton of stages, and you kind of like make your way through each one. It's a little linear, but it has kind of a Metroid feel.
Why did you have to say that? Now I'm gonna go buy it.
Kawamoto also worked on Legendary Wings, Last Duel, and Forgotten Worlds. Those are all pretty popular titles as well.
Right.
Last one, Harumi Fujita.
Mega Man 3. And worked on, was it Gargoyle's Quest? One of the Gargoyle's Quest games? I'm not sure which one. Maybe 2? No?
Might be right there. Hold on. Gargoyle's Quest with Yoko Shimomura.
Okay. Yeah, if I recall, this Harumi Fujita, she worked on only some of the tracks from Mega Man 3. If I recall correctly, like her husband got sick. He was working on some of the tracks.
Well, she only did Needleman, Gemini Man, and part of the staff role for Mega Man 3. So, yeah, Yasuaki Fujita, her husband, did the rest of the Mega Man 3 soundtrack.
Which is funny, because that means she worked on the 3 tracks that are my least favorite on that soundtrack.
You know,
I like the staff role.
probably only the version that Yasuaki did.
Yeah. No, Yasuaki Fujita worked on all the tracks that I friggin' love. The intro, music.
Well, I guess we know which one of the married couple you're
The dude.
going to town with.
Yeah, Yasuaki
Whatever that
Fujita.
means. Anyways, Fujita...
This works on...
Harumi Fujita also worked on Gargoyles, or aside from Gargoyle's Quest, worked on a couple of tracks in the original Final Fight, Sky Blazer, Polestar, Spawn, the video game which we did a clarification corner on recently,
That is correct.
Tomba, Blazing Star, and Magical Tetris Challenge for Game Boy Color, which actually had a really good soundtrack.
I apparently have some sort of thing for Mary Yamaguchi because I've assumed that she's done soundtracks for games that she didn't do. So this is a second clarification corner where I needed to say that Mary Yamaguchi did not write this track. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of Capcom games in that era, they had a lot of different composers working on the same soundtracks, you know? So
Very true.
sometimes they might even be uncredited. However, let's get to the actual music. We talked so much about these composers. As far as the songs go, which of these, the arcade version or the PC Engine?
I gotta say PC Engine.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I
go with
agree.
PC Engine. Yeah.
There's a ton. This is kind of regarded as one of the best PC Engine soundtracks
Really?
available.
Okay.
Every track sounds a little bit different from each other, and they're all of like top-notch quality. And I mean, I guess that makes sense because there's so many different composers working on these tracks. And from what I understand, all of the composers that wrote the arcade versions also came back and wrote their own PC Engine versions.
That's cool.
As well. So
That's
there weren't
really
any
cool.
arrangers or anything like that, so the vision kind of stayed true. The game itself is totally solid. Like, I thought it was a super graphics game the first time I played it. This is actually one of the few PC Engine games I actually own.
Okay.
I don't even know how I came about owning it. I've worked at so many... My brother and I have both worked at so many video game stores. We've just kind of collected random games over the years, and this one was just kind of sitting on my shelf.
I'm gonna guess, though. I'm gonna guess that you walked up to the counter and you handed somebody money and then they gave you the game.
I don't think so.
No?
I wouldn't have actually purchased a PC Engine game, I
No?
don't think.
Do you think
Well,
maybe your brother
because
got
my
it for
PC
you, or-
Engine was, I think, it was my brother's and he didn't want it, so I ended up with it. So chances are it came along with that system.
Okay.
Generally, you know, people like at Funko or GameStop, they would try to trade in something that we didn't take. So for instance, like somebody would have come into Funko Land with a PC Engine.
Yeah.
We've been like, we don't have a listing for this, we can't take it. However, I will buy this from you for, you know, for a certain amount of money, and then
Totally
you would
illegal.
just go, well, if we couldn't take it, it was fair game.
Right.
If it was something that Funko Land could have taken,
Yeah.
and we said we would give you cash for it on the side, then that's totally against their policy.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
it was something you can't, then you're welcome to make a deal. You just can't do it in the store. You have
Right.
to go out to the parking lot, meet them after work, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
So I have a feeling of this PC Engine was probably procured in that kind
Oh,
of...
trust me, I did those deals too when I worked at Game Crazy.
Yeah, you know,
I
as
mean,
long
it
as it's
just
not like
happened.
something that it could happen,
Yeah.
like you're not taking money away from the store, it's
Right.
not harming them.
Yeah.
But anyways, so that's how I came about a lot of these imports and kind of rare games that I do own now.
Cool.
But anyways, so I was really impressed with this game. It's very, very solid, very playable. There's like cool little intro and outro graphics for each level, and the music just rocks. I mean, excellent drum sounds. And in this particular song, it's so jazzy on the PC Engine, and they have that lead synth just kind of ends up changing and morphing into different sounds as the song goes on. And it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, the arcade version sounds very lackluster. It sounds very flat sounding.
It's really early hardware.
Mm.
I think it was just one of the early YM20, it might have been a 2203 in there. It just wasn't a very powerful FM chip, so
Yeah.
it didn't really have the power to kind of get across, I think, what the composers were trying to do with the music.
I don't want to say that Capcom didn't know what they were doing when it came to the really early arcade games. I just think they really came out to shine on different systems. Like, I just don't think arcade was really their forte for the most part. I think Konami definitely knew what they were doing on the arcade regarding sound.
I'd say once the CPS system came out,
Right.
Capcom really came into their own with Final Fight,
Agreed.
obviously Street Fighter, you know.
Right, right.
But pre that system, when they were still using the older hardware for their
Right.
arcades, definitely they weren't as awesome as they ended up being.
Right. It's not that the music was bad or anything like that. It just was very plain sounding. And I think that when maybe it was the time that a lot of their composers spent on the Famicom and on the NES, that they were kind of like, oh, this is how you do music on these systems. Well, you know, because these guys are always, for the most part, composers first and sound engineers last.
Right. It always kind of amazed me, though, that arcade games could have awesome music, because
True.
when you think about arcades, and I think about my time in them when I was a kid, you're not listening to the music at
True.
all. Like, all you really hear is the sound effects.
Yeah.
And even if the sound on the arcade cabinet is turned up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe in Japan, you know, that they're more sound insulated from each other, so you can actually hear the full audio of the game. It's like, but a lot of these really incredible soundtracks, at least in the US arcades that I grew up in, like, these soundtracks went completely unlistened to and unappreciated.
True. No,
So
that's very
it's
true.
just really cool that even if the soundtracks aren't so stellar, they can still be, you know, listened to and shared and stuff like that. So
True story.
I just like being able to bring them out into the forefront.
Let us know what you think about these tracks, all of them. We want to get your opinions on what you thought was the best track for each song. And let us know. You can talk to us about this episode on facebook.com/groups/PixelTunes Radio. Join us. We love hearing from you guys, and you guys can post in that group, which is different from the page that we also have set up where you can't post. So we want to know your thoughts on these tracks. Which ones did you like the best? Which ones did you like the least? Do you agree with Mike? Do you agree with Ed? Let us know in the comments.
Do you agree with neither of us?
Do you agree with neither of us? That is true.
Or both of us.
Maybe somebody really likes the Sega Ages version of Golden Axe.
True.
But they
It's
would
a
be
decent track.
wrong.
Also, you can tweet at us. We are at PixelTunes Radio on Twitter. Feel free to follow us. We will certainly follow you back.
That is correct. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you can always watch us on youtube.com/dongold, which is my channel. And you can listen/look at pictures of our actual like games themselves. And you know, it's meant to be listened to in various different methods. You can listen to it all in one shot, or you can kind of play it as you go. One really nice thing about the YouTube video, or at least as far as I can tell, is that if you play the video and then you're stopping the video, or if you go away from the page, it'll pick right back up from where you left off if you have an account with YouTube and you're signed in listening to the track. So
it's true.
I usually recommend that for most people who are on the go and don't have all the time to listen to a 2-hour podcast.
And as a reminder, guys, as we talked about at the top of the podcast, don't forget, if you have an idea for an awesome song that you'd like to play for episode 39, please find our post on the PixelTunes group Facebook page. Let us know your suggestions, and if we pick your track to be played, and you will get your little 15 minutes of fame on our podcast.
Oh, snap.
So
Who's
have that
gonna
in.
Be?
Have that in by June 28th, and that will be on our episode 39 show listener requests.
What's coming up next week? Or in the next 2 weeks?
Ooh, we're gonna do something special in 2 weeks. We're gonna do a arcade beat 'em up spotlight, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pick 2 awesome kind of obscure beat 'em ups that were only arcade releases.
That's right.
And
consoles.
kind of showcase them and their awesome soundtracks, and definitely gonna be a fun episode.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about these incredible pieces of music that we're gonna have next episode.
Right. Hey, we're gonna throw these games together in one meaty, beefy, crunchy, taco-y soundtrack.
Like a double-decker taco.
Like a double-decker
taco beat 'em up love.
face. That's right. All about tacos here at PixelTunes Radio.
Pixel Taco Radio.
That's right.
Excellent.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Pixel Taco Radio.
We should do Taco Tuesdays at
We
Pixel
could
Taco
do
Castle.
like a Mexican episode where we eat tacos while we talk to people.
We can just play Sunset Riders.
Oh, we can talk about how good tacos are while we eat tacos.
People with tacos in their mouth talking about how great tacos are.
Oh man, these tacos are so good.
Fantastic. All right, guys, we will catch you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to send us your suggestions on the Facebook page. Peace out, taco lovers.